Hello, my name is Olivia Ming, once again, and my pronouns are they, them, and we are now going to be discussing developmental age. So, this point is very important, and it's something that I um, have noticed throughout my 4 months at Launchpad. I That's why I wanted to create this whole developmental age PowerPoint. So, our guests often display the life skills of an early adolescent around ages 10 to 19 years old. This is extremely important to remember throughout your interactions with the guests. So, as y'all know, our guests are within the young adult age group, also called emerging adults. This is people aged 18 to 25 years old, and 26 is also included in a lot of literature as well. So, yes. And within this age group, typically individuals are making their own decisions, gaining financial independence, and they're going to be independent with all self-care tasks. They're going to be displaying increased self-regulation skills and just the overall ability to handle more stress and responsibility because they have gone through a typical adolescence and now they are in young adulthood and are able to take those emotional regulation and social skills and everything and apply them to their daily lives, to work, play, everything. So I'm hoping my face isn't in the way of y'all, but I apologize if it is. Okay, so these are typical risk factors for adolescents and young adults. Um, when I was researching risk factors for the both of them, they were the same, essentially. So this is the compiled list for both. So substance use, drug and alcohol experimentation are common and can be caused by peer pressure. So these individuals are typically hanging out in groups. It's never a hopefully it's never a you're alone all the time type of situation. Um, so drug and alcohol experimentation are going to be common, especially on the streets. Eating disorders. So these come into play due to social, environmental, and emotional factors, especially with social media, in today's age of social media, how everything, how everyone talks about weight and everything. Um, anyway, so the two most common are anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa. So, anorexia nervosa, in the simplest of terms, is the restriction of intake of food and nutrients. Um, and bulimia nervosa is the binging and then purging of that food. Um, so the individual is not getting those nutrients or gaining any weight. So, well, that's person specific, but so the next risk factor is high risk behaviors. So this age group is going to seek out things like jumping off of a cliff, skydiving. That's not everyone, but like driving really fast in a car, um, stealing something from a Walmart, maybe. So this is going to lead to the highest cause of death for both adolescents and young adults to be accidents, homicide, and suicide, which all of these things are mainly preventable, so it's important to be aware. Okay, so this is a graphic of developmental milestones, kind of a continuum, and this is my attempt at making it, so I hope it comes across from my brain, but In the next two slides, we're going to be discussing this in further detail. I just wanted to have a visual, so I'll move kind of quickly through this. So adolescence begins at 10 years old, and then around 12 years old, this says AFAB period may begin. AFAB stands for assigned female at birth, so people with a uterus may begin their period between around 12 to 14, sometimes later or earlier, person specific. Romantic and sexual interests begin around 14 to 17 years old. And throughout this time, our bodies are growing, changing. So there are a lot of hormones. Everything is, you'll have those growing pains, all of that. And then at 18 years old, this is when late adolescence and young adulthood begins. So throughout this whole time, so a stronger sense of self. Um, throughout, I take that back. I'm okay. At 19 to 24 years old, strong individuals will have a stronger sense of self, be less reliant on peers, and have increased emotional regulation and critical thinking skills. So this is also due to the fact that they've been through these experiences, they've had their brain developing with the no trauma coming into it, and they're just learning and um, experiencing a typical childhood. So that's, and then around 25 to 26, in some literature, the frontal lobe is mostly fully developed, and so are those skills. Well, you can continue learning, but for the most part, they are fully developed. Okay, so this is a slide with the normative characteristics for adolescents, ages 10 to 19. And I want to point out before I dive into this that the ages say 10 to 19. And then on this next slide, they're going to say for late adolescence, young adulthood, 18 to 25. Um, that's not to confuse you. It's just there's some overflow um, between, and that's also a late adolescence. So just wanted to point that out. Okay. So preteen to teen is essentially what this adolescence 10 to 19 is. So puberty is going to begin. So individuals assigned female at birth experience puberty 1 to 2 years earlier than individuals assigned male at birth. Individuals assigned female at birth experience first period around 12 years old, as I was saying in the previous slide. And as you can imagine, there's anxiety around body changes, especially for transgender children. Um, Black and white thinking is occurring, exploring, and black and white thinking is like, yes, this can happen. No, this can't happen. There is no in between. Okay, so exploring independence from the family unit and their peer groups. So going out, hanging out with friends, going bowling. Um, it looks like these folks are at an arcade or something. Yeah, looks like fun. Romantic and sexual interests begin around 14 to 17 years old, and that comes along with an increased concern with appearance, which is also why eating disorders are a common risk factor for this age group as well. And the frontal lobe, once again, is continuing to develop. So now I hope you can see this. Okay. So now we're going to discuss late adolescence and young adulthood, so ages 18 to 25 years old. So this is when, as I have said previously, critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and emotional regulation are mostly fully developed due to the frontal lobe by 25. Um, Individuals are concerned with relationships and physical and emotional intimacy. So instead of just the more kind of lustful, like, oh, I'm now experiencing these sexual feelings as an adolescent, In this age group, they're going to be asking questions such as what kind of relationship structure fits me best and supports my beliefs and values, and what kind of person would suit me best as a partner. So that's definitely not that sort of black and white thinking. Um, so these individuals can also think about the future hypothetically, abstractly, and apply new ideas with a stronger sense of self. They have the decisions and values they make are more innate and they have less influence from peers. So we're moving on from the peer groups and into the more, I kind of know what I want. Maybe I have one or two close friends instead of, oh, we have to invite all our friends out. We have like six friends and yeah. Um, More focus is on the future, career growth, and individual concerns. Interests also become more stable and the ability to compromise, huge one. The ability to compromise is that comes along with the maturity of the frontal lobe. So, because of all of this that we just discussed, now we move on to the how of how we can help our guests now that we know kind of their developmental age and a history of what might be going on in their brains. So, their developmental age is much like that of an adolescence based on what we've seen. So the black and white thinking, inability to compromise, all of that. So this is what research has said that these supports on this slide are what research has said is what these individuals need, whether whether it's through formal or informal programming. So caring adults, number one, connections to their schools and communities, basics like food, shelter, and safety, opportunities to test their values and make a difference. Um, and young people who have these supports in place are more likely to become healthy adults and less likely to be involved in risky behaviors, generally will do better in school, and are more likely to believe in their own abilities. So have like that autonomy and that internal drive to do what they want and make a difference where they would like to. So, I wanted to touch on, I've been discussing the frontal lobe development, so I just want to talk about this a little bit in further detail. So, the frontal lobe of the brain, the yellow part of this picture right here, is responsible for higher level thinking, such as critical thinking, problem solving, and emotional regulation skills. It starts to develop during early adolescence, as I have said, and the final push for development begins at 16 to 17 years of age. So this means that around 16 to 17 years old, the brain is going to be making all of these, you're taking in all of this information and everything around you, and it's really kind of getting in your brain, solidifying how you are going to kind of deal with stressors and if you're gonna, if your body is honestly going to be in fight or flight or not. So the frontal lobe is fully developed around age 25. If these, this is the very important part. If these skills and brain functions are not gained before this time, it will require much more practice and effort to develop those skills. So think of it as learning a language at a young age. Say you took Spanish for 5 years from first to fifth grade. You're gonna most likely remember a lot more words and grammar of Spanish than you would if you took 2 years in high school and that was it. Um, because it's an earlier age, you're taking it for longer, all of that. So, um, because of this final push for development at 16 to 17, it's it's really important that all of these Um, right here, all of these supports are in place beginning, I mean, from the beginning of their life, but especially in adolescence and around 10 to 17, and especially up to 25. So, um, now I'm going to move my little screen. So now, I just want to talk about how homelessness affects development. And this is from a lot of literature I've read. So, um, there is a lack of healthy coping strategies that leads to a decreased quality of life. And this is self-blame. This is due to self-blame, rumination, um, which is like thinking about something over and over, and catastrophizing, which is thinking that everything you're gonna do is gonna go bad and nothing is ever gonna go right. So those are common cognitive coping strategies that are learned from being homeless. So this causes a decreased sense of autonomy and quality of life in those homeless young adults. Um, so another thing is decreased self-esteem, sleep disturbances, increased risk of anxiety, depression, and other mental health conditions. And here's a quote. It says, "Those exposed to multiple forms of maltreatment have more than 3 times the odds of developing a mental disorder." And you think about, being homeless as at this age, it's it's going they're going to come across maltreatment um, in multiple ways. It could be sexual, um, people are being racist, people are being homophobic, all of these things. And then there's an increased risk of drug and alcohol use and addiction, which is already a risk factor for that age group. And then a decrease in independence and physical health. This is due to, all of these things happening to them, and they aren't able to get out of this fight or flight mode. They are constantly in fight or flight. Um, and then there's one more point I wanted to talk about. So there's strong evidence of an association between childhood trauma and later mental illness. So the association is particularly evident for exposure to these specific things. So bullying, emotional abuse, maltreatment, and parental loss. Um, the evidence suggests that childhood and adolescence are an important time for risk for later mental illness and an important period in which to focus intervention strategies. So this is all just saying that it's important to identify, and now we know these risk factors. Now let's try to mitigate them and put these supports in place so that their development can continue. Thank you. Um, the next one we're going to talk about is trauma-informed care. But here are my references.